Texas woman dies after eating raw oysters of a flesh-eating virus infection. I'll roll down here and show you the story.
CBS local: a woman's crabbing trip in Louisiana turned tragic after she died from a flesh-eating bacterial infection health officials say came from eating raw oysters. Jeanette LeBlanc of Texas reportedly purchased a sack of raw oysters in Westwego, Louisiana during a family vacation in September. The woman's wife told local reporters that the trouble started after LeBlanc ate about 2 dozen of the oysters. About 36 hours later she started having extreme respiratory distress, had a rash on her legs and everything, Vicki Bergquist told KLFY. The woman's condition got even worse over the next 2 days and doctors determined that LeBlanc had been infected with Vibrio eating bacteria. She had severe wounds on her legs from that bacteria, Bergquist added. According to the CDC, the victim's family was at the wrong place at the wrong time. Vibrio bacteria naturally live in certain coastal waters and are present in higher concentrations between May and October when water temperatures are warmer, according to the CDC's description. About 80,000 cases of vibriosis are diagnosed in the United States each year, with most of the illnesses coming from eating raw shellfish. While most cases are mild and patients recover within 3 days, much more serious forms of the infection can put victims in intensive care or result in limb amputation. A quarter of patients with the severe form of the illness die. Jeanette LeBlanc died on October 15, 2017 after battling the infection for 3 weeks. I can't even imagine going through that for 21 days, much less a day, family friend Karen Bowers added. If they really knew what could happen to them and they could literally die within 36 hours of eating raw oysters, is it really worth it? If we had known that the risk was so high, I think she would have stopped eating oysters, LeBlanc's partner said. While eating raw oysters is commonplace and the risk is low, it is not negligible. The Food and Drug Administration, FDA, has a page on their website devoted to myths associated with raw oysters and the Vibrio bacteria that can be contracted as a result.
Tips for cooking shellfish. So in case you like to eat them, but you're not quite sure what the safety rules are for cooking.
Before cooking, discard any shellfish with open shells. For shellfish in the shell, either boil until the shells open and continue boiling 5 more minutes, or steam until the shells open and continue steaming for 9 more minutes. Only eat shellfish that open during cooking. Discard shellfish that do not open fully after cooking. For shucked oysters, either boil for at least 3 minutes, fry in oil for at least 3 minutes at 375 degrees Fahrenheit, broil 3 inches from heat for 3 minutes, or bake at 450 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 minutes.
And here's prevention tips for being around, the open water and dealing with the disease.
Reduce your risk of vibriosis by following these tips. Don't eat raw or undercooked oysters or other shellfish. Cook them before eating. Always wash your hands with soap and water after handling raw shellfish. Avoid contaminating cooked shellfish with raw shellfish and its juices. Stay out of brackish or salt water if you have a wound, including cuts and scrapes, or cover your wound with a waterproof bandage if there's a possibility it could come into contact with brackish or salt water, raw seafood, or raw seafood juices. Brackish water is a mixture of fresh and sea water. It is often found where rivers meet the sea. Wash wounds and cuts thoroughly with soap and water if they have been exposed to seawater or raw seafood or its juices. If you develop a skin infection, tell your medical provider if your skin has come into contact with brackish or salt water, raw seafood, or raw seafood juices. If you are in a group more likely to get vibriosis, wear clothes and shoes that can protect you from cuts and scrapes when in brackish or salt water. Wear protective gloves when handling raw seafood. Many people enjoy eating raw oysters, and raw oyster bars are popping up at some of the trendiest restaurants. but eating raw oysters and other undercooked seafood can put you at risk for infections, including vibriosis, which is caused by certain strains of Vibrio bacteria. Vibrio bacteria naturally inhabit coastal waters where oysters live. Because oysters feed by filtering water, bacteria can concentrate in their tissues. When someone eats raw or undercooked oysters, viruses, or bacteria that may be in the oyster can cause illness. You can get very sick from eating raw oysters. Most Vibrio infections from oysters result in only diarrhea and vomiting. However, some infections, such as those caused by Vibrio vulnificus, can cause more severe illness, including bloodstream infections and severe blistering skin lesions. Many people with V. vulnificus infections require intensive care or limb amputations, and 15 to 30% of infections are fatal.
It's an interview you will only see here on Action News. Joey Barra has the story, and we warn you the images you're about to see are graphic.
Camille Flores shared this image of her son's hand on Facebook. He was already